The Trouble with Captain Underpants. Now it can be told. An informational comic by George and Harold. Once upon a time there were two cool kids named George and Harold. We kick butt. Me too. But they had a mean principal named Mr. Krupp. Come over here, Bubs. No way. One time George and Harold hypnotized Mr. Krupp with the 3D hypno ring. You will obey our command. Okay, zap. George and Harold made him think he was a great superhero named Captain Underpants. Look, I'm Captain Underpants. Ha ha ha! It was funny at first, but then Mr. Krupp jumped out the window. Hey, where do you think you're going? To fight crime, okay? George and Harold had to chase after him so he wouldn't get killed and hurt. Come over here, Bub. No way. They had many adventures with lots of inappropriate humor. Diapers and toilets and poop. Oh my! Then one day Mr. Krupp accidentally drank super juice. Glub glub. Now he got superpowers. He can fly too. Tra-la-la. Two things you have to be careful about is water and finger snaps. If you snap your fingers by Mr. Krupp, snap, he turns into Captain Underpants. Tra-la-la. And if you pour water on Captain Underpants' head, he turns back into Mr. Krupp. Blah blah blah. So if you see Mr. Krupp, don't snap your fingers or you'll be sorry. And if you see Captain Underpants, don't pour no water on his head or you'll be sorrier. Remember, this is top secret, so don't tell anybody. Chapter 1. George and Harold. This is George Beard and Harold Hutchins. George is the kid on the left with the tie and the flat top. Harold is the one on the right with the t-shirt and the bad haircut. Remember that now. People, please wear your socks on the gym floor. At most schools, the teachers try to emphasize the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. But George and Harold's teacher, Miss Rebel, was more concerned with enforcing what she called the 3 S's. Sit down, shut your pie holes, and stop driving me crazy. While this was unfortunate for all of her students, it was especially bad for George and Harold, because they were very imaginative boys. You see, imagination was not really encouraged at George and Harold's school. In fact, it was discouraged. Imagination would only get you a one-way ticket to the principal's office. This was sad for George and Harold because they didn't get straight A's, they weren't sports stars, and they could barely walk down the hallway without getting into trouble. See what I mean? Please go pee-pee on your socks for warmth. But George and Harold had one thing that most of the other folks at Jerome Horwitz Elementary School didn't have: imagination. They were full of it. And one day they would use that imagination to save the entire human race from being overthrown by a crazed woman with even crazier superpowers. But before I can tell you that story, I have to tell you this story. Chapter 2, Mrs. Ribble's Big News. One fine day, George and Harold's homeroom teacher, Miss Ribble, entered the classroom looking a bit meaner than usual. All right, settle down, shouted Miss Ribble. I have some bad news. I'm retiring. Hooray! Cried the children. Not today, snapped Miss Ribble. At the end of the school year. Aw, man, moaned the children. But the staff is throwing a retirement party for me today, said Miss Ribble. Hooray! During recess, said Miss Ribble. Aw, man, moaned the children. There will be lots of free ice cream, said Miss Ribble. Hooray! Cried the children. My favorite flavor, chunky tofu, said Miss Ribble. Aw, man, moaned the children. But first, said Miss Ribble, it's time for something fun. Hooray! Cried the children. You all get to make happy retirement cards for me, said Miss Ribble. Aw, man, moaned the children. Chapter 3, When You Care Enough to Send the Very Best. Miss Ribble went around the classroom handing out envelopes, sheets of construction paper, and butterfly stencils to all the children. Then she wrote a poem on the chalkboard. All right, take out your crayons, said Miss Ribble harshly. I want you to use stencils to make a yellow butterfly on the front of your cards. When you're done, copy this poem on the inside. Roses are red, violets are blue. You're retiring and we'll miss you. Signed, your name here. Can we make up our own poems? Asked Melvin Seedley. No, snapped Miss Ribble. Do we have to use stencils? Asked Aaron Mancini. Yes, yelled Miss Ribble. Can we make our butterflies purple? Asked Stephanie Yarkoff. No, screamed Miss Rebel. Butterflies are yellow. Everyone knows that. While the rest of the class worked on their cards, George and Harold had a better idea. Let's make Miss Rebel a comic book instead. Yeah, said Harold. We can make it all about her. It'll be cool. So that's just what they did. Chapter 4, Captain Underpants and the Wrath of the Wicked Wedgie Woman by George Beard and Harold Hutchins. Captain Underpants and the Wrath of the Wicked Wedgie Woman, story by George Beard, pictures by Harold Hutchins. Once upon a time there was a really mean teacher named Miss Rebel who was very mean. Grr, I am evil. She gave us lots of homework and yelled at us all the time. Read 250 pages for a test. Aw, man. One time at Christmas vacation, she gave everybody 41 book reports. Ho, ho, ho. Wake up, it's time to open your presents. I have to do my homework. After Christmas, everybody turned in a big pile of book reports. Ha, ha, ha. And something terrible happened. Help, crash. Miss Rebel was buried in a mountain of book reports. She's really most sincerely dead. No, she's not. We can rebuild her, Doctor. We can make her better than she was. Faster, stronger, eviler. When Miss Rebel got out of the hospital, she had bionic powers. I'll take over the world. Ha ha ha. So she made an evil costume. Snip snip. Her bionic beehive hairdo opened up to reveal an evil wedgie roboclaw. Ha ha. Nobody can stop me now. Innocent bystander. Ouchies! Help, the wedgie woman is in the teacher's lounge. She just drank all the coffee and now she's giving the gym teacher a killer wedgie. Oh, the horror! She better make a fresh pot. This looks like a job for Captain Underpants. Crash. What's the problem, bub? Help, it's Wedgie Woman. So Captain Underpants got into a big fight with Wedgie Woman. She tried to give him a wedgie, but Captain Underpants was faster than a speeding waistband, more powerful than boxer shorts. Ouch! And able to leap tall buildings without getting a wedgie. Tra-la-la! Rats! So Wedgie Woman went to the store to buy some spray starch. New spray starch. Warning, do not spray this product on your underwear or you'll be sorry. Starch is the enemy of underwear. Wedgie Woman sprayed. Gotcha. Hey! Oh no, my underpants is all stiff and uncomfortable. Ha ha ha. Captain Underpants tried to push the buttons on his utility waistband, but they were broke. He was powerless. I'm doomed. Wedgie Woman gave Captain Underpants a big wedgie. Then she hung him from a pole. Rats, nobody can stop me now. Soon some kids came by. Captain Underpants needs our help. So they threw him a rope. Catch! Then they pulled real hard and let go. Boing! Splash. The kids poured fabric softener in the pool. Suddenly, the starch got washed away. Hooray! My underpants is soft and cottony once again. Hallelujah! Thanks, kids. No problemo. Soon Captain Underpants found Wedgie Woman. Remember me? Get him, Rebel Claw. He flew up, it's wedgie time, and looped around. The Roboclaw reached for underwear, but it grabbed the wrong pair. Owie wowie! It's off to jail with you. Aw, man. Tra-la-la. Hooray! The end. Notice, any similarities to actual persons living or dead is very, very unfortunate. Chapter 5, The Wrath of Miss Rebel. When Miss Rebel read the comic book that George and Harold had made, she was furious. Boy, she yelled, you just earned yourselves a one-way ticket to the principal's office. But all we did was use our imagination, said George. You're not allowed to do that in this school, snapped Miss Rebel. Didn't you read Chapter 1? George and Harold gathered their things, and soon they were sitting in the office outside Mr. Krupp's door. Mr. Krupp is on the phone, said the school secretary, Miss Anthrope. Why don't you boys make yourselves useful and copy the Friday memo for me? You can pass them all to all the classrooms for me when I go out to lunch. Aw, man, said George. Quit your whining, Buster. I want this done by the time I get back, or you'll both be sorry. Miss Anthrope grabbed her coat and stomped out the door. Jerome Horwitz Elementary School Friday Memo. George and Harold looked at the Friday Memo. It was a weekly newsletter that told all about the events of the upcoming week. "Hey," said George, "Miss Anthrope's computer is still on. You want to make a few changes to this newsletter?" "Why not?" said Harold. Friday Memo. Next week's news. So George and Harold typed up their own version of the Jerome Horwitz Elementary School Friday Memo. Then they ran off copies for all the students in the school. Chapter 6, the retirement card. George and Harold were gathering their new and improved Friday Memo copies into small piles when Principal Krupp came into the office. "Hey!" Mr. Krupp shouted. "What are you two troublemakers doing in here?" "Miss Anthrope told us to pass the Friday Memo out to all the classrooms," said George innocently. "We'll make it snappy," yelled Principal Krupp. Suddenly, Harold got a sneaky idea. He took out the blank piece of construction paper that Miss Ribble had given him earlier. "Hey, Mr. Krupp," said Harold, "will you sign this retirement card for our teacher?" Mr. Krupp grabbed the card from Harold and eyed it suspiciously. "This card is blank," Mr. Krupp growled. "I know," said Harold. "Our class is going to decorate it later. We wanted you to be the first to sign it." "Well, all right then," said Mr. Krupp. He opened the card and quickly scribbled, "Signed, Mr. Krupp," on the inside. Then he stormed out of the office. Mindless conformity. It's cool. It's fun. Be just like everybody else. Individuality causes pain. "What are you going to do with that?" asked George. "You'll see," said Harold, smiling. Chapter 7, Reverse Psychology. George and Harold passed out the Friday Memo and made it back to their classroom just in time for Miss Ribble's retirement party. George quickly changed the letters around on the sign outside the door, while Harold wrote a special greeting on Mr. Krupp's card and stuffed it into the envelope. "Have a blissfully grand retirement, Miss Ribble." "Miss Ribble really needs a breath mint." "Hey, Bob!" shouted Mr. Krupp as he stormed down the hall. "What do you kids think you're doing?" "We're going to Miss Ribble's retirement party," said George. "That's what you think, smart guy," said Mr. Krupp. "Miss Ribble showed me that comic book you boys made about her, and now I catch you changing the letters around on another sign. You boys aren't going to any party. You're going straight to the detention room." "Well, fine," said Harold. "Then we're not going to give Miss Ribble the card our class made for her." Mr. Krupp quickly swiped the card out of Harold's hand. "Ha ha!" he shouted. "I'm going to make sure she gets this card. I'm going to give it to her myself." "Aw, man," said Harold. Swipe. George and Harold walked down the hallway toward the detention room. "Wow," said George. "That was pretty cool how you got Mr. Krupp to deliver that phony card for you." "Yep," said Harold. "I used reverse psychology on him." "I gotta try it out sometime," said George. "By the way, what did you write on the card?" "You'll see," said Harold, smiling. Chapter 8, The Party. Miss Ribble's retirement party started out bad and just got worse. First, Miss Ribble forced the class to sing a corny song to her. By the time she was done yelling at the boys for singing off-key, the chunky tofu ice cream was melted. Everybody had to read it anyway. "We love Miss Ribble," written and arranged by Miss Ribble. Tara Ribble. "We love Miss Ribble. Oh, yes, we do. We don't love anyone as much as you. When you retire, we'll be blue. Oh, Miss Ribble, we love you." Then the children handed in their happy retirement cards. Miss Ribble ripped several of the cards up because some of the children had mistakenly drawn polka dots on their butterflies. One unfortunate boy had also drawn a happy, smiling sunshine on his card, and he had to stand in the corner. Finally, Mr. Krupp stepped forward and handed Miss Ribble the card he had snatched from Harold's hand. I went to a lot of trouble to get this for you," Mr. Krupp said gallantly. Miss Ribble tore the envelope open and read the card out loud. "You're one hot mama," said Miss Ribble, with a shocked look on her face. "Ew!" cried the children. She opened the card and read the inside. "Will you marry me?" signed Mr. Krupp. "Ew!" cried the children. The teachers gasped, then the room grew silent. Miss Ribble glared over at Mr. Krupp, who had turned bright red and began sweating profusely. He tried to speak. He tried to tell her it was all a big mistake. He tried to say something, but all that came out was bubba hubba 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 wah wah. Congratulations, said Mr. Meaner as he patted Mr. Krupp's sweaty, shivering shoulder. Yes, congratulations, shouted Miss Anthrope. This will be the best wedding in the whole world. We can have it here at the school, a week from Saturday. I'll plan everything. You lovebirds don't have to worry about a thing. Great, thanks, said Miss Ribble, still looking quite angry and confused. Bubba hobba 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 wah wah, said Mr. Krupp. Chapter 9, Freaky Weeky. The following week at Jerome Horwitz Elementary School was definitely one of the weirdest ones that they had in a while. For example, none of the kids showed up for school on Monday, but Mr. Krupp didn't even seem to notice. Hey, where is everybody today? Asked Mr. Rected. Hobba 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 wah wah, said Mr. Krupp. On Tuesday, everybody did show up, in their pajamas. Why is everybody picking their noses? Asked Miss Fit. Hobba 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 wah wah, said Mr. Krupp. On Wednesday, for some strange reason, the whole school smelled like garlic and rotten egg salad sandwiches, especially some of the girls. Boy, said Miss Guide, the styles today are sure getting bizarre. Hobba 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 wah wah, said Mr. Krupp. Tuesday was, without a doubt, a complete and total disaster. There's a food fight in the lunchroom, shouted Mr. Rustworthy, and the football team is destroying the teacher's lounge. Hobba 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 wah wah, said Mr. Krupp. Now, nobody was sure what happened on Friday. Apparently there was a mix-up with the dress code in the yearbook photos. Our school pictures are ruined, shouted Miss Dakin. Hobba 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 wah wah, said Mr. Krupp. Yes, it was a freaky week, all right, but the big wedding was only a day away and things were about to get really freaky. Chapter 10, The Big Wedding. It was Saturday, the day of the big wedding. Miss Anthrope, true to her word, had taken care of everything. In just 1 week, she transformed the gymnasium into a beautiful wedding hall, complete with food, decorations, and even a 6-foot-tall ice sculpture. All the children were dressed in their finest clothes. Harold even wore a tie. Man, said George, I can't believe we have to go to school on Saturday. I know, said Harold. Why couldn't they have had this wedding during Monday's math test? Soon the organist began to play. The rabbi walked down the aisle. He approached George and Harold and stopped to talk to the boys. I've heard a lot about you two, said the rabbi, and I don't want you boys playing any of your tricks today. Silly rabbi, said George. Tricks are for kids. Believe it or not, George and Harold had not planned any pranks for the big wedding. They had no joy buzzers up their sleeves, no squirting flowers in their lapels, and no whoopee cushions on their chairs. They were on their best behavior. Nothing could go wrong today. In no time at all, Miss Ribble and Mr. Krupp were standing in front of the rabbi, looking quite ill. The rabbi asked Mr. Krupp if he would take Miss Ribble to be his lawfully wedded wife. Hobba hobba wah wah, said Mr. Krupp. Then the rabbi asked Miss Ribble if she would take Mr. Krupp to be her husband. There was a long silence. Everyone leaned forward. Miss Ribble looked nervously from side to side. Suddenly, she shouted out at the top of her lungs, "No!" Miss Ribble turned to Krupp and jabbed her finger into his shoulder. "Listen, Krupp," she said, "I can't marry you." "Hooray, aw, that's too bad," said Mr. Krupp. "You're a mean, cruel, and vicious man," said Miss Ribble, "and I respect that. It's just what?" asked Mr. Krupp. "It's just your nose," said Miss Ribble. "You've got the most ridiculous nose. I never seen anything quite like it. I just couldn't marry somebody with such a silly nose." Mr. Krupp got angry. "Well, fine," he shouted. "I didn't want to marry you anyway. It was all George and Harold's fault. They tricked us." Suddenly, everybody in the gymnasium turned and looked at George and Harold. "Time to go," said George. Chapter 11, The Refreshments. As George and Harold turned to leave the gymnasium, they heard the loud thumps of cleated wedding boots clomping down the aisle toward them. "I'm gonna grind those kids in a head cheese!" screamed Miss Ribble as she lunged for the two boys. George and Harold screamed and ran to the back of the room near the refreshments. There they hid behind two large wooden pillars. Miss Ribble approached the pillars and grasped them with her mighty hands. With a horrible roar, she pushed the right pillar over. It landed on the back of the luncheon table, causing the front of the table to flip high into the air. Unfortunately, this sent all the food flying into the crowd. The creamy candy carrots clobbered the kindergartners. The fatty fried fish fritters flipped onto the first graders. The sweet and sour spaghetti squash splattered the second graders. 3,000 thawing thimbleberries flooded the third graders. 500 frosted fudgy fruit cakes flogged the fourth graders. And 55 fistfuls of fancy French fried frankfurters flattened the fifth graders. By now, you're probably worried what the wedding guests had nothing to drink with. That the wedding guests had nothing to drink with their lovely appetizers. Well, rest assured, the second pillar took care of that. Miss Ribble pushed the left pillar into the fresh fruit display, causing it to topple over, sending 2 large watermelons crashing down into 2 oversized punch bowls. This created 2 enormous splashes of tropical fruit-flavored punch, which rained down upon the wedding guests like a torrential downpour. Now, no wedding is complete without a wedding cake, and when Miss Ribble kicked the ice sculpture over, the resulting crash sent the beautiful double-decker cake flipping high into the air, right over Miss Ribble's head. "I got you now!" screamed Miss Ribble as she grabbed George and Harold by their neckties. Splat! George and Harold undid their ties and ran out of the gymnasium screaming. "Man," cried Harold, "I thought we were dead meat." "That's what we get for going to school on Saturday," said George. Chapter 12. Ribble's Revenge. As you might imagine, George and Harold were nervous about going back to class on Monday, but for some strange reason, Miss Ribble seemed happy to see them. "Good morning, boys," Miss Ribble chirped with a giant evil toothy grin. "Come here, I got something to show you." "Uh-oh," said George. "She's smiling. That can't be a good sign." George and Harold cautiously approached Miss Ribble's desk. "I took the liberty of adjusting your grades last weekend," said Miss Ribble. "You'll be happy to know that all your grades just dropped from B's and C's to F's and G's." "Oh no!" George gasped. "Not F's and G's! Hey, what's a G?" "It's the only grade lower than an F," said Miss Ribble. "There's no such grade as a G," said Harold. "There is now, Bob," said Miss Ribble. "Looks like you're both going to flunk the 4th grade. Won't that be fun?" "No way," said George. "That's not fair." "Life ain't fair," said Miss Ribble. "Get used to it." Chapter 13. A Bad Idea. That afternoon, George and Harold sat in their treehouse feeling sorry for themselves. "She can't get away with that," said George. "We got to tell somebody about this." "Nobody is going to believe us," said Harold. "Well, there is one thing we can do," said George. He opened the drawer to their drawing table and searched through the pennies, paper clips, dried spitballs, and rubber bands. Then he pulled out a dusty plastic ring with some gum stuck on it. It was the 3D hypno ring. "Oh no," said Harold. "I thought we threw that thing away." "We just threw the instructions away," said George. "But I remember how it works." "Do you remember what happened the last time we used it?" asked Harold. "Yeah," said George, "but we were fooling around last time. This time we'll be serious. We won't make any mistakes. All we have to do is hypnotize her into changing our grades back to normal. That's all." "Oh no," said Harold. "It sounds like a bad idea to me." "Worse than flunking the 4th grade?" asked George. "Good point," said Harold. Chapter 14. The Return of the 3D Hypno Ring. The next day at school, George and Harold stayed behind while the rest of the class went outside for recess. "What are you punks still doing here?" asked Miss Ribble. Said George nervously. We wanted to show you this really cool ring." "Yeah," said Harold. "If you look closely at it, you can see a funny picture." "Well, hold it still," said Miss Ribble, as she stared at the ring intently. "I have to move it back and forth," said George, "or you won't be able to see the picture." Miss Ribble's eyes followed the ring back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. "You are getting sleepy," said George. "Very sleepy," said Harold. Miss Ribble yawned. Her eyes began to droop. "I'm so sleepy," she said as she slowly closed her eyes. "In a moment," said George, "I'll snap my fingers. Then you'll be hypnotized." "So sleepy," mumbled Miss Ribble. "Snap now," said Harold. "You must listen very